over to our experts and ask them to introduce themselves. So starting with Mark Spalding.
Hello, good evening. Thank you very much for allowing me to be part of all this. I'm a marine biologist. I've been working for quite a long time now, about 15, 16 years with the Nature Conservancy, which is one of the bigger conservation NGOs. My focus has always been on trying to tell the big picture about the state of the planet and what we're doing to save it. But in recent years, if any of you tuned into my presentation, I've been focusing quite a lot on trying to quantify some of the many benefits that nature gives us. And that's a huge range of things, from the way coral reefs break waves to the storage of carbon in mangrove forests and so on. And those benefits are huge. And what I spoke about in my presentation was really, if we can quantify those better, tell that story better, we're going to do a much better job. We are beginning to do a much better job of getting everyone on board to try and do more to protect what's left and even to start restoring what we've lost.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to move over to Nairobi. No, somewhere in Kenya, not Nairobi, Nanyuki perhaps, and introduce to you Gautam Shah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much. Yeah, so my name is Gautam. I am in Nanyuki, Kenya right now, so right on the equator. You know, my background is actually not in biology, conservation, wildlife, or any of that. I spent 20 years as an IT consultant, working for a large IT consulting firm. Eventually, I quit that job, and fast forward, I started a company called Internet of Elephants, and the whole goal of Internet of Elephants is to look into new approaches to storytelling, new approaches to, specifically storytelling about wildlife and wildlife science, in an effort to try and engage a much larger public, with the work that's going on, but also engage them at a deeper level than, what I would say traditional engagement tools and techniques have done in the past. So Internet of Elephants specifically takes real wildlife science and real wildlife science data that's being collected by our partners in the field, converts those to stories, and then uses mediums like games and other sort of interactive digital approaches to try and bring them to a much wider audience.
Thanks, Gautam. I'm just going to remind everybody, please, to send in your questions, and so that we've got some nice variety. We've already got quite a few questions coming in now, and yeah, just send them over and we'll try and cover as many as we can. We've got a question, well, we've got 2 or 3 questions actually now directly in front of me. Let me just put that probably to both of you actually. What innovative idea are each of you most excited to see come to life within conservation? And that's coming in from Natalie Lauries. So Mark, how about you? Do you want to take that one?
Okay, there's so many. I'm always tempted at a question like this to pick something sort of way out and fun, and I can talk about some of those later, but I will talk about the one which I touched on in my talk, because I think it's the scale of it which to me is quite exciting. And I talked about something we're calling blue bonds, and it goes back to an idea that actually has been worked in conservation for quite some time. It's the idea of reframing a country's debt. You go in a country, many countries, scores of countries have huge debts. This is an idea that's come from the economists, and it basically, we go in and we say, well, we can rework your debt. It's a bit like remortgaging your house. Right. And the people who are helping them to do that are people who've got an interest in conservation, but still want a return on their investments. So we've done that in the Seychelles. It's been a tremendous success. The Seychelles have this massive benefit of a reduced debt, but they have also made an agreement to set aside 30% of their ocean, which is an area the size of Germany, and they've protected that in return for a debt reduction and setting up all the mechanisms that will ensure that that protection is solid. And what's happened now is we're taking that to scale. So we're looking at 10 more countries. So we're talking about millions of square kilometers of the planet being securely converted to protected areas, which will not only benefit nature, but also benefit fishers and many others too. And so it's a clever idea. It's kind of been reworked for modern times and for modern financial systems and markets, and it really has this possibility of scaling to sort of a continent-sized area of the ocean getting protected in the next 10 years. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Gautam, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm excited about Mark's idea. I mean, I absolutely love it. So I mean, I'm not entirely joking when I say I think these are the types of ideas that get me excited and they get me hopeful. Like Mark, I think there's a lot of really good innovation that's going on. I don't always find that innovation is supported at the level that that it needs to be, but broadly speaking, I'm excited about the types of partnerships that we're now willing to consider that we perhaps never used to to consider in the past, or the scenarios where conservation organizations are now working with traditionally who might have been the enemies, and I use that word a little bit loosely, but to think about, well, wait a second, there's a value proposition for everybody, and if we can figure out that value proposition in a way that's not CSR, but that it is truly a value proposition, and very specific to us, it's like animal content, wildlife content is really, really interesting to a lot of people. It sells. I mean, all brands, etc. Use animals. We've been attracted to them ever since we were born. All the things that we ever looked at were about wildlife and about animals. And if we can, and we are seeing more examples of this, we can start to find a common ground that says for all these organizations that have incredible reach and a tremendous amount of eyeballs already on their products, if content, wildlife, storytelling, etc., starts to be a value proposition to their customers, it then becomes something that they naturally do because it's good for their business, as opposed to let's do it as a CSR project. And I think whether that's with governments or with large brands, etc., those are the types of innovations that I'm seeing more of. That I guess I wasn't really looking very hard 10 years ago, but I imagine we're pretty much non-existent.
Oh, that's interesting, because that ties in nicely with the question that Pete has asked, and I guess it relates in terms of capitalism. Do you think that capitalism is in conflict with conservation or sustainability? And that idea of partnering with perhaps those that you wouldn't necessarily have thought you would is coming through in some of the questions here as well.
I'm not qualified to say whether it's whether it is or whether it's not, but I guess I wouldn't look at it. I wouldn't look at it that way. So rather than trying to fight capitalism, if I believed that was the case, rather than spend my energy trying to fight capitalism, I'd be looking for ways that conservation could benefit capitalism, and therefore that could become a little bit more of a virtuous circle. So I really don't know, and for me to say whether it is or it isn't, it's beyond my pay grade. But I definitely know for sure that the reality of the world is that if we can find a way where there's a win-win on both sides, that's the way forward. Not just this constant fighting of everybody that we think is against us or is against what we're trying to do. There's just so many flaws in that approach. That we certainly look for the ways to work together.
Okay, Mark, just because I've got a direct question for you, I'm just going to read this out to you. How do you see high resolution satellite thermal infrared monitoring technique to be used to help for ocean protection and sustainability? And it comes in from somebody, H. Ben. Do you get that question, or do you want me to repeat it?
Well, I think there was a sort of almost a shopping list of sort of remote sensing options there for me to sort of go through, and there's with that, of course, lots of answers as well. And it's exciting what we're starting to get through the kind of remote sensing technology. I'm sort of very glad to be using some of the latest mapping tools that we're getting now, coming from satellite imagery. There's a new global map of coral reefs coming out very shortly. I have a postdoc at Cambridge working on a new salt marsh map. So we're starting to know what's where in a really high resolution way. With that knowledge, we can also start to understand what's threatening, where the change is happening. With that, we can start to push for policy change and so on. So although it's sort of multiple steps, these are really important pieces of information that we need. And there's a really nice example, I think, of how it's also helping us often actually in close to real time. And it's to do with, well, there's a web platform called Global Forest Watch, which is enabling people to see in real time where we're losing forest cover. And a kind of nice, if sad, example of how valuable that was when the fires were burning in Brazil a couple of years ago now, I think, and there was an effort to deny the fact of these fires by Bolsonaro. And you could simply go online and say, no, look, it's there, we can see it burning, because we were getting these images processed and in real time onto public platforms where anyone could see it. And so we're starting to get to the place where that kind of use of technology is really exciting, and really helping us to stand our ground in arguments, to build better models and concepts for planning what we do next. We're doing a lot of work now on restoration. It's in fact the UN Decade of Restoration. We're starting to think about where we can start putting things back. I work quite a bit on mangrove forests, which, as you probably know, are a rare forest type anyway, but we've lost maybe as much as half of the world's mangrove forests already as they get converted to agriculture and aquaculture and so on. With these models, with these maps, we can also start to predict or to model the optimum places for putting mangroves back, for starting this process of curing nature, of turning things around, which is pretty important too. I could probably go on, but I better not.
No, thank you, Mark. That's great. Just a reminder to the audience that they can vote for their favourite questions in the Q&A. So if you have a look at that as well, just follow us and yeah, just check out the questions really. A question from Gareth, maybe a combined question from Gareth, that says, is there any way to reverse species loss going further than conservation? And also, what about seed banks? And then he goes on to say something about evolution, survival of species via breeding or GM.
Mark.
Yeah.
Mark.
Mark, and then I'll give you a rest. Second.
Right. Well, again, there's quite a bit packed into that. I'm going to reversing species loss. Well, I mean, the first thing we've got to do is stop losing. Is stop the bleeding. You know, the idea that we can bring things back is exciting, but it's possibly a long way off. But I would think more it's also a bit of a distraction from, we're still losing things at an incredible rate. So we need to stop the bleeding before we start thinking about that. Maybe one day we'll have woolly mammoths again, but that's not for me a priority anyway. The idea of seed banks, I'm no expert, but this is the idea that we can store away genetic diversity for the long term, for a future planet where we're more in control. It certainly seems a pretty sensible thing to be doing. I'm intrigued by the idea of genetic manipulation. It's very controversial. I think rightly so, but I work a lot on coral reefs, and as many of you probably know, coral reefs are really on the front line of decline. They're super sensitive to warming waters and ocean acidification, and they are degrading fast almost everywhere. And it seems to be this sort of hypersensitivity of the animals that build the ecosystem, these little corals. And there are quite powerful voices, even in the conservation community, saying we need to think about the possibility of doing some kind of manipulation of the genetics of corals in order to have coral reefs in the future. Now, I find that a pretty frightening thing that we're even having that conversation. But we do need to probably have that conversation, decide whether, the public feels that's a good idea, because releasing any kind of genetically changed organism into the environment, it's very hard to put them back again, take them out again.
Yeah.
It is something we need to consider. Of course we do. But for me, the priority has to be stop the bleeding. Let's try and turn things around. And I think we're hearing lots of stories about how we are turning things around.
Okay, thank you, Mark. That was a really good answer, actually, and a good question. I think this one probably, Gautam, is for you, and there's another one actually for you. Is it, and this is coming from Charlotte Frank, is it possible to quantify the value of nature for individual businesses with the data that you are collecting, basically providing a forecast of what is at stake for them as organizations?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the answer is yes. Specifically, the way that we look at it is we're trying to build a body of evidence that indicates that the general public has a value, values nature, much more than maybe people think, right? So if I can, through the if we can, through the products that we create and and all the partners that that hopefully we bring on board, we can start to build this evidence that say, hey, look, actually people have an opportunity through these games and through these outlets to express what's important to them. That could be very, very powerful data that's then being fed back to the very organizations that are selling products and services into the market and saying like, oh, well, the people that are playing your games or the people that are playing, any of these things or interacting with these things in any of these ways, there's an overlap between those people and our customers. And if we're seeing evidence that X, Y, and Z is very important within their value system, then we can start to adjust the products and services that we offer, or the way that we offer them, or the way that we source them, or or whatever that happens to be. So long-term benefit of what we do is 100% intended to start and influence consumer markets and and the entire marketplaces. That's not something that can happen overnight. But ultimately we just don't think that there is enough data, that there is enough evidence to do that, and this is one of the ways that we think that we can build that.
Oh, great, thank you. Just a little nudge. Please vote for your favorite question by clicking the thumbs up icon. Yeah, that would be really good. Gautam, just another one for you, I think. And this is coming in from Fabio Orlini, and he says, seems that almost all human beings want to have a positive impact on the planet. What factors prevent the creation of a global environmental community, and how to overcome them? And that's from Fabio. Yeah.
Well, I will say I've learned a lot from someone named Dr. Renee Lertzman on this, and so some of the things that I say, I'm saying the things that she taught me. But she often talks about just the anxiety that people feel and the conflict that people feel when environment-related messages come their way, and this sense of it's so overwhelming that what can I possibly do that's gonna do anything that can tackle climate change or the extinction of the northern the northern white rhino, and B, my life is a certain way, and of course I don't want plastics in the ocean, but I've got this to do today. I've got my kids to drop off at school. I've got to get my job done. I've got and all these things create so much conflict, and that of course I don't want these things to happen, but at the same time there's other things that are going in my life that creates this conflict or this ambivalence. And I mean, I think as a conservation community that is trying to engage people or trying to to build those movements, the first thing that we need to do is recognize that that's the problem, not that people don't care, not that people don't have enough knowledge, or that if they only had the facts, then then they would think differently, or if they only cared as much as us in the in this tiny little world of conservationists, well then everything would be solved. And it's just, that's never, that doesn't work, hasn't worked, is never going to work. And so approaches that recognize that this is really bloody hard. It's hard for me, right? Like I struggle every day with my own actions, and I turn off all the news bits that are negative because I can't handle it, you know, and I'm in this space. So what can I expect of people that, you know, that aren't in this space? I think that's one of the biggest things that prevents it, if I'm answering the question that's, you know, that's being asked. And, you know, as a conservation sector and society, and, you know, and earth optimism, etc., you know, is being able to recognize that, oh, this is really hard for people, and we have to accept that it's really hard for them, and we need to start acknowledging that it's hard and thinking in those terms, as opposed to kind of thinking, if only people cared more, or if only people knew the facts, or if only people had the knowledge, then everything would be, you know, everything would be different.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think you're right. You're really hitting it there, because I think we all feel the same. We all kind of get to a point where we think, oh my gosh, I can't do anything, you know, and some days it's, you know, it's worse than others, and you feel slightly disabled. But you're right, it's about capturing something that you can do and being able to feel positive about it when you do something about it. This leads really nicely into this question of, well, it's a COVID question. Due to the economic fall during COVID, do you think that a green recovery is possible, or would even help? Well, that's an interesting one, because, yeah, okay, I'm going to let you guys go in there. Mark, what do you think?
I think it's a pessimistic question, and I think I'm optimistic about it. I think, yes, COVID's woken, I think, everyone up to certain things that they hadn't thought about before, whether it's just birdsong in cities, or the fact that we can talk to each other via Zoom rather than always traveling. You know, there's so many different ways in which COVID has had its impact. Of course, it's had tragic impacts, so I don't want to kind of belittle that, but we're going to come out of it the other side. It's a long period of behavior change for the planet, and it's enabled people to think, and probably to think about how they start up again. And I think there will be positive changes across the board, or could be, and it's an opportunity. It's probably an opportunity we need to start grasping quickly, because there is the danger of sort of going back into bad habits. But there are many answers, many positive things that could come out of it. I've been working quite a bit looking at tourism, the tourism sector, what I call nature-dependent tourism, which isn't always going to look at wildlife or go scuba diving. Quite often, the dependency that a hotel has on a beautiful view, which is a natural view, you know, that's a dependency on nature too. What I think the tourism sector, which has been one of the worst hit, and when we think about this, we think about entire countries that depend on the tourism sector. The impacts have been really tough on them. As they rebuild tourism, I'm hopeful, and I think it would be to their advantage, to start thinking about enabling people to enjoy nature more, because people are not going to want to go back into crowded cruise ships or onto packed solid beaches or dense areas. They're going to be looking. We've all, either through fear or through a sort of renewed discovery of the values and wonders of nature, we're going to be looking for different experiences, probably traveling less far, and also looking for more natural experiences. So I think there are opportunities probably in every sector that we need to explore, but I'm hopeful that there will be lots of positives coming out of it.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. And this is I guess it's a question for either of you, really. Which countries would you say are role models for their innovative approaches to conservation, and how can we follow them? Gautam, what do you think?
Which countries?
Yeah.
Wow, you know, again, I don't know that I'm the right person to ask, because I guess I haven't really thought about innovative approaches at a country level.
Well,
yeah, I'm sorry. Can I pass? I just feel like anything that I say would just be so uninformed.
Look, you know, you can
yeah.
pass. We all have a sort of a sense of positive stuff going on in different places.
Yeah.
So that it's maybe not one place, it's probably a variety of different things going on.
I mean, I've always kind of felt that countries like Costa Rica, for example, have seemed quite forward-looking with the way that they look at their own national parks, and their own protected areas. But again, I don't know the reasons behind that. I don't know if they're innovative in their thinking. It's just something at the surface that seems to be that way. But yeah, that's why I just don't feel comfortable saying.
Yeah, no, that's good. Mark, I'm just going to ask you to answer that really briefly because I've got a couple of others for you.
Yeah, I mean, I would skim around the world throwing little examples of particular bits. I think Costa Rica would be one. I think, there's a lovely talk, you haven't seen it yet, about the Maldives and the fisheries there. And the Maldives is doing a fantastic job with its tuna fishery, where tuna are in decline everywhere, but the Maldives aren't. I mean, they're doing a really good job of having sustainable fishery. Then I'd probably move to some Scandinavian countries to think about how people are reducing emissions and so on. So hard to say. I think the important thing is that we learn from other countries, and so we do need to get these lessons flowing from place to place. We do need to tell these stories so that the people who are less innovative but are happy to follow along behind know there's something to follow along behind, because that's the challenge at the moment. There's some brilliant things going on around the world at the scale of countries, but smaller as well. We've got to tell the stories so that other people would say, oh, that's a good idea, I'll do that.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because actually that leads into this well, it's a pollution question. There's quite a few questions actually on plastic that are coming in. Louise Carter asks, could we start charging companies a plastic tax, or look at how plastic might be, how much plastic there might be in the average piece of cod that you eat, or even fish. Now, I guess that's a question for you. That's coming in from Helen Whitney. And there's a few more on plastics as well, which are very similar. So yeah, tell me, Mark, I think you're going to have to answer that one. Sorry. If you briefly just touch on that, really, I guess, yeah, what are you finding? What are your thoughts? Plastics in fish,
yeah.
taxing companies.
Well, plastic's a huge problem, and I think that was talked about also, I think, quite a bit yesterday. And we've got to stop. And I think Heather was saying yesterday, Heather Calderway was saying, the first thing we've got to do is against that same thing, stop the bleeding. We need to clean up plastics, but we've also got to stop the flow of plastics. And so that question about taxing is excellent. I think measures like that are really going to work. We've got to turn things around by creating disincentives for using substances that pollute. Plastic is pretty high on that list. You can do that through public information campaigns. I think people can create demand for less plastic, less packaging, and so on. But I'm also a great believer that will only get you so far. I think we need to have legal frameworks or economic frameworks that also create the disincentives that tip us into a new sort of strategy for using products that are going to pollute, create challenges for the planet.
Yeah,
so I think it's a thumbs up for me for taxing plastic generally. But the other thing that was said yesterday, and I think it's true, is that plastic is also incredible stuff. We're silly if we say we want to get rid of all plastic.
Yeah.
It's an incredible material which is stopping food waste and so on. So, but a tax is a fine way of sorting that out, because it just kind of creates that premium price and may change use.
I think the concern, I think one of the other concerns for Helen was really, she's buying a bag of chips. How much plastic is she buying in her fish? And I guess that's something we're all thinking about these days.
This is again where, again, I don't know if a tax is the right thing or not, but I would still just like to see the public demanding in some way or expressing in some way, we don't want this. Because still, to be honest, we want plastic and we want the conveniences that it brings. And most importantly, in many cases, we want the fact that it's cheaper than the alternative. And I don't put all the impetus on corporates or companies to have to solve solve that. I put a lot of that also just on us as individuals to say, okay, you know what, I want the alternative. I'm willing to pay more for the alternative. Maybe I don't have to pay more, but and have a way of expressing that. And again, that's where, if we're able to collect that type of data, that this is what people want, I think naturally, as consumers, if we want something different, we'll potentially get something. We'll potentially get something different. So yes, maybe a tax, maybe that creates some incentives on the supply side, but we've got to create those incentives on the demand side as well. And I think that goes for a lot of things. When we think about wildlife trade, or illegal wildlife trade, if we talk about plastics, if we talk about anything associated with carbon, I think those things have to be thought of from the consumer side and from the demand side as well as from the supply side.
Yeah.
I think another route into this, rather than perhaps taxes and legislations, is I may hear myself saying this, but thinking about creating markets, just as we're starting to do with carbon markets. And if you look, for example, in the US, the Clean Air Act, setting up markets where you trade in pollution, your right to pollute, and then you start to have a cap and trade system where you set the amount. You can't produce more than this of a certain damaging product, and then businesses look for innovative ways to reduce, so they can sell their surplus ability to pollute, if you like, and others will buy it, and there'll be the dirty old industries. So maybe that's another route with plastic as well that we think about trading schemes.
Okay, thanks. That's been really well answered, actually. Thank you so much for your contributions, both of you, on that one. The most voted question seems to be this one that's coming up here from Gareth. How do you get politicians, industry, and the finance sector to take any notice of what conservationists and scientists say? Well, which one of you would like that one?
Yeah.
I
mean, if I answer, I'll kind of be saying the same thing that I'll be beating on my dead horse, and that's where, again, it's the will of the people, and it's how do the people that live, how do the constituents of these countries, how do the consumers of these products, etc., how do they start expressing a value system that's going to influence the politicians, because they're going to know that this is what's important to the people within, this is what's important to my citizens, or the companies that are selling products who are going to say, well, this is what's important to my customers. And so data plays Mark's been talking about this a lot as well. I mean, data just plays a massive role in being able to present that type of evidence. You can get a certain distance with anecdotal information, but ultimately you need the data that shows it, and that data has to be trusted by the sources that you're showing it to. And I think that can do it, but you've just got to have a data that it's the will of the people that this is what they want. I just don't think that the conservation sector is going to go and convince any of these entities. Yeah, a little bit, but not at the scale that we needed to. We need data that says that this is what the public wants.
Okay, yeah. Mark, do you want to add something there?
Well, I'm going to be a bit cheeky as well, Veronica, because I've got the questions up here, and I can see there's another one which relates to it from Mia. And I think it's quite interesting. She puts the question the other way around. If we continue to equate natural resources with monetary value, don't we put ourselves into a difficult situation there too? And I have a picture that I put up sometimes when I'm giving a lecture, which is a picture of the demand for marine space. It's actually the coast of Belgium, but it could be anywhere. And you see what's happening now in the marine space. And of course, we used to think of the sea as the edge of everything, with a few brave fishers going out and doing their stuff. But now we've got people digging for aggregates or mining on the seabed. We've got oil and gas extraction. We've got shipping lanes. We've got people setting up renewable energy. We've got the tourism sector, sailing, boating, so on and so on. And we're trying to squeeze nature conservation into that picture. And we've done it in the past with a sort of, well, because it's lovely, you've got to look after it. And if people don't share our value system, they're going to say, well, yeah, I'd much rather see an oil rig because it's going to employ my family, whatever, you know. So while I'm a massive lover of nature, and for me that ticks all the boxes and I'll fight for it, it doesn't work in a wider financial system. So what we've been trying to do with some of our work, and many others too, are trying to do this now. We're trying to say, well, okay, let's get the numbers, the data, as Gautam is saying, so that we can have that argument in the same room as the developers, the oil and gas industry, and so on, that we can do that. So we think we have enough of an argument when we get the data to really stand our ground. So for me, it's really important that we start to build up this story in a numerical, solid numerical way. But it's also, to answer Mia, important that we don't lose sight of the fact that that's an added argument to the one I already hold in my heart, which is also that because it's their argument, it's beautiful, it's special. So it's an additional argument, but it's an important one.
Okay, thank you for that.
The scary thing for me, Mark, is what if all our data doesn't support what we wanted to, doesn't support what we wanted to support. So when you do start talking about like creating a monetary value on elephants or forests, and then you find out, okay, we've put a number on it, and somebody else can come back and say like, okay, well, I can bid higher than that, and it's like, oh, I just tried to make an argument that that this has this value, and somebody's able to put something, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I put a value on it and I lost. And you lost. That's a little bit, that's scary to me.
Yeah, I agree. We did a study on tourism and found that actually tourism, the value of coral reefs for tourism was only went above zero for 30% of the world's coral reefs. They're not worth anything for tourism. 70%. Yeah. But that's why I come back to the fact that this is an additional argument. It's not the only argument. And once you've got it, then we can carry on fighting our fight because we love elephants. But if they've got a monetary value, it's on top of that.
Okay, I agree. About 5 more minutes. So I just want to go into this area here, which is really about, well, it's a question for both of you. It comes from Alec Christie. What is the one key innovation you believe needs prioritizing in terms of research or development in your field? And can big business help? Just one key idea that really that needs prioritizing.
I think innovation on funding innovation. So one of the things that I still feel that I see a lot within our sector is a lot of talk about innovation, but absolutely no willing to take risks on the fact that maybe that innovation will fail, right? And so there is a very conservative nature. There are exceptions, but there's a very conservative nature to, I want to be innovative, but I don't want to fail. And if I'm not willing to fail, and if I'm not willing to, to risk something, whether that's money, whether that's credibility, whether that's my brand, whether it's my reputation, whatever, even maybe whether it's the loss of a habitat, the innovation itself is just going to be a lot of talk and a few little pocket examples of something, that's really nice. We're very, very comfortable with what we've done for the last 70 years. We know what we're going to get out of it. We know that it's not enough, but we also know that there's, only a certain floor with it. I think that we actually need innovation in the way that we fund and that we support actual, and I'll just leave the word innovation off of it, actual risk taking for massive outcomes that are different than what we've done. So the ideas are out there. The technology is out there when you need technology. The research, it's out there. I don't think that we've got an approach to actually supporting it and taking the risks and taking the types of risks that we need to take.
I really like that, Gautam. I really like that, because it's, you're saying, innovation, and keep on looking for those new ideas, because we're
supporting them. Right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what we are fine. Okay, yeah, you might spend $5 million support, and it might absolutely and totally fail. And you might spend, a lot less and do something that you've always done, and it's not going to move the needle. It's not going to move the needle at all. So,
and you've got to be risky. You've got to be prepared to take risks.
Yeah, well, 100%.
Yeah. Mark, any additions?
No, I was thinking all sorts of different directions. I think climate change is the big fear worldwide now. It's happening so fast. And then I started thinking, well, what are the innovations? Well, in fact, there are so many. And actually, my feeling quite strongly on the innovation front, particularly on climate change, is there is probably not a silver bullet. So I don't want to say there's one innovation that's going to save the planet. There really isn't. It's going to come through a multiplicity of innovations. But I agree with Gautam, there's a lot already there. So a couple of things I would like to see, and I start thinking they're not really innovations. I'd like to stop mad subsidies that are still supporting the oil and gas sector, for example. But probably the innovation I want to see is the spreading of ideas, encouraging the spread of ideas so they're getting out faster, because the ideas are there, they're being developed, and they're not being necessarily transmitted fast enough, because we need to act fast. So maybe my innovation is more about communication. Let's get it out there, tell people.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've actually got time for maybe a couple more questions, so I'm just going to carry on for a few more minutes yet. Do any of you have a view on Elinor Ostrom's ideas about avoiding the tragedy of the commons by giving control over the ownership of natural resources to the communities in which they reside?
It's an excellent argument for fisheries. Generally speaking, fisheries have suffered for decades from having this being a common resource where, or treated as a common resource where, the supply was sort of infinite and we could just keep on taking more and more. And of course it's not. And the examples from coasts around the world where you give local ownership to an offshore patch and you just see this complete revolution. People defend their patch from the other fishers and the fish stocks recover. So it's tremendous how that works and how that approach then can often pass almost like wildfire, village to village. They say, well, if you close off an area, for example, the fish spill out and you get more fish around the edge, and then you go village to village in some Pacific islands and they're all doing it. So yes, I think it's a good idea, but I'm not always sure that sort of the privatization of nature is always going to be right. So yes and no, probably, but there's some great ideas around that.
Okay, yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? But anyway, let me push on, because I'm just really thinking about the time that we've got left, and there's a couple that have been in the queue here. One is it's anonymous anyway. How does playing games really help? Don't you need gamers who understand the environment and its problems? Oh, that's a good one for you, Gautam.
How does playing games really help? Well, that's what people are doing. Yeah. So what are people doing in their lives? And mobile games alone, I think it's 2.5 billion people, right? And then you can start adding in all the other types of games that exist. This is what people are doing. So I think about not necessarily how can I stop people from playing games or get them to do something different, but I think about like, okay, well, how can the content, how can the stories, how can the information, etc., that we want to, that we want to spread actually start coming in, through the games. And that's both for people who already have a disposition towards the environment and climate and wildlife, but also for what is a very large number of people who love animals, love wildlife, love nature, but absolutely never think about, never think about conservation, never think about their actions, never think about their behaviors, etc. So I really, really look at it as a fantastic channel to get people thinking about it on a daily basis, and not in a preachy way, not in a hey, here's what you should do type of way, but just making it top of mind, just like sports is, just like politics is, just like television is. Why isn't nature and wildlife in people's mind? Why isn't that water cooler conversation on a regular basis? The other thing that I think games does, and Jane McGonigal did a spectacular TED talk on this, is when you're playing games, you're solving problems. Yeah, you are solving. I mean, every game that you play, ultimately, you're solving problems. You're using your brain in a different way, and it might be a very micro problem. I've just got to fit this piece over here, right now, or it can be a much larger, problem, which affects an entire universe. And that's a tremendous thing to try and harness, is this desire to solve problems that can be applied, to solving problems for the planet, or to solving problems for the world. So yeah, I think obviously I'm biased in this, because this is where I work, but surely, surely the playing of games and harnessing that problem solving and harnessing that channel that everybody's on anyhow, is something that we could be taking much more advantage of.
Oh, brilliant. No, that's really interesting. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, I've tried playing games. I'm not very good at it. I have to admit, but it is a problem-solving exercise for me as well, because obviously challenging my technological skills and the speed in which I can work and try and play the game. But I'm telling you, I've really tried. It's quite good fun though. Regarding the ability to monitor deforestation from satellites, is this a double-edged sword, enabling illegal loggers to identify target areas? That's coming in from Stuart at Stratwell. Mark, would you have a view on this one?
Sure. The information's there, Stuart. So the people are using information that is publicly accessible all the time now. So it's not as if we can hide information from people who want to use it for nefarious purposes. I feel that what the conservation world is doing is partly playing a game of catch up here. If you think about fisheries as well, the tuna boats for years have gone out with live satellite imagery, so they can see the warm water fronts where the tuna gather, and they go and throw their nets down there. The knowledge is there. I think for us, it's a game of catch up, and so the answer is yes, it's a double-edged sword, but at the moment we've got to get ourselves much more engaged, I think, in the technology, so that we can kind of get ahead of the game.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we can probably take another question, and let me go to Karen Mayo. How can we stop or influence the illegal trade? And she says, I'm really thinking about vaquita. Is that right? I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. Vaquita, which is close to extinction. Who'd like to take that on? Gautam, are you happy to take that one?
How can we stop illegal trade? Whew, if I had the answer to that question, yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, as an individual, the number one thing that you can do is to not buy illegal wildlife products, not support organizations, that may be involved in illegal wildlife trade. As a tourist, often, yeah, sure, you're sitting in St. Louis in America, and the number of opportunities to buy something illegal is pretty small. But often, when you're a tourist and traveling to other countries, and you have no idea that some hat or something else that you buy is using products that are illegal. So, I mean, honestly, there's probably a better answer to this. But as a single individual, make decisions that do not support the trade. And sometimes that means, yeah, as you're traveling or as you're making purchases or etc., that you're needing to do a little bit of research, a little bit of get a little bit of a better understanding on what it is you're buying, and and what harm that it could be doing. So again, I have a tendency to look at an entire supply chain of this, and people always ask me, like, can you make a game about shooting poachers? And I'm like, I will never make a game about shooting poachers, because that just reduces the problem to to potentially the smallest piece of that puzzle. And so yeah, having that understanding of where these products come from, what are the opportunities that you might end up in, that you might buy something, and just absolutely 100% making sure, no matter how nice something looks or how good it's going to look in a photograph or whatever it happens to be, that you're not purchasing it.
Can I just jump in, because I think
Yeah.
it just ties in with today's theme quite well, that you're right, as individuals we have to do what we can as individuals, but I think technology might have some interesting roles to play here. There've been some studies looking at what fish people were buying, and finding that what they thought they were buying was very rarely what it was. Particularly there was some studies in California where I think none of the tuna that people were buying in certain sushi restaurants was tuna. And this was an eco-labeling issue. This was people were just cheating the system. They were selling fish, and we don't know where that was happening. But we've now got incredibly efficient, or increasingly efficient, DNA barcoding. So it's actually possible to go into a supermarket, if you're an NGO, for example, take samples of fish, see what it says on the packet, and test it, and it's not the fish that it says on the packet. We're getting to the point where we can tell you, if you see a shark on a market, which subpopulation that shark came from in an ocean. So, for example, it may have come from a marine protected area, and we might know enough about the genetic code of that shark that we can say that that shark for sale in that market came from an illegal harvest. So we're getting to the point where technology could potentially help. And another form of technology might come from distributed ledger type technology, blockchain type technology, where if you've got a legal trade, you can build that into a blockchain type system. So those products can be tracked, all permanently tracked, so that anything, you can't break into that system and add things to it. So I think there might be some technological fixes. The issue sadly with the vaquita is a far more pressing and difficult one. This is one of the world's smallest, I think it is the world's smallest porpoise, but it's dying because of a trade, of the harvest of another fish, the totoaba, which gets caught in the nets in the northern Gulf of California. The totoaba fish is protected too. It's just so incredibly valuable I think it's in East Asia, that people are, there are gunfights taking place to try and catch the totoaba, and this poor porpoise is just caught in that horrific situation. That can only be saved, I think, by policing.
I think that's really interesting. I think the use of technology in that respect is something that we are all going to be able to tap into across the world eventually. And I think some, as you say, some more recent than others are able to access this technology. This evening's event has been really fascinating, and we've got lots of questions still to answer, but I'm afraid it doesn't look like we're going to have enough time to continue to do that. But I really want to thank everyone who's put in their questions for us this evening and made this event so interesting and captivating. And I'm looking at them. There's so many more really wild questions, which I'm sure if you get a chance, you can continue to answer online, or maybe we'll get a chance to answer in some other time, but not this evening. But I really want to thank both of our experts, and I'm sure everyone will agree that they have been brilliant and real experts. Thank you both, Mark and also Gautam, for your time and for taking all of these different questions and answering them as best and as expertly. And I've learned a lot from you as well, actually, having not had this opportunity before. So both of you, thank you so much. And I hope that we get to do this again. But I know Earth Optimism will be doing this again, because tomorrow evening we've got another Q&A, and that's going to be, if you look at the website, on the Earth Optimism website, you'll see tomorrow's event is Saving Species. It's another live Q&A event. And I hope that you will all try and enter and ask some more questions. Put in your questions if you can, as soon as you can, and we'll try and answer them again. It won't be me that's chairing, unfortunately, but I'm really hoping that we'll all have the opportunity to participate in this really fantastic festival, which is being sponsored and run by Earth Optimism by Cambridge University. Thank you, everybody, for a great evening, and I hope that we all get to meet again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.